Hi, everybody. We are so happy that you're here today joining us for our Lunch and Learn webinar. My name is Mindy Johnston, and I am the Area District Manager of our Multicultural Community Services here at Lutheran Community Services Northwest in Vancouver. And I will be hosting today's webinar. As many of you know, this is the 7th webinar in an 8-part series, and today we will be focusing on our programs in Clark County. Many of you know that we resettle refugees, but our work includes other programs that you may not know about. So today we're going to give a glimpse into some of those programs and the people who lead them. We have a great group of panelists from our Vancouver office. We have Joe Asbridge and Yasenka from our ICAP program, our Immigration Counseling and Advocacy program. And I will also share a little bit about our crime victim advocacy services. Behind the scenes, we have Jamie, Carrie, and Jenica from our advancement team, and they are here running tech, and they'll be here to help answer questions. The goal of today's presentation is to give you a better understanding of what LCSNW does in our community. We hope that you'll come away with a deeper knowledge of our challenges and successes, and as well as share some ways that you can get involved in our work if you're interested in supporting what we do. I know that many of you are already supporting what we do, and you probably have maybe connected with us through some of our refugee work. So a couple of logistics before we dive into our content. We will have the Q&A function up and running, so you can fill it in at the bar at the bottom of your screen. If you think of questions during the presentation, feel free to put them into the question and answer box. At the end, we will answer as many of those questions as we can. There's also the chat feature, which you can use, but the best way to get your questions answered is to use the Q&A. So a little bit about me and my role. So I have had many different roles at LCSNW over the years. I've been with the agency just under 12 years. I started in 2011 with our victim advocacy program. So sorry, I'm just looking at the chat, wondering if I need to correct something. So the it looks like there maybe are questions about the Q&A box. The Q&A box is down by the chat. So anyway, I started in 2011 with our victim advocacy program. We had gotten a contract through the Department of Commerce, and I was brought on to launch that program in Vancouver. But since that time, I've also been I've taught ESL, English language classes. I have worked in our citizenship program in Portland. I have been managing our refugee resettlement work for the last 5 or 6 years. I have expanded our crime victim services into Portland. We have a couple of different contracts now in Portland. And I've also developed some restorative justice work out of our Portland program. And so now, after all this time, I am working as our area district manager in Vancouver with oversight of all of our programs. Before coming to LCS, I've always done human services, what I would say human services work. I've worked with youth and group homes. I've worked with folks from East Africa from different sides of conflict with the aim of dialogue and reconciliation. And I've done some restorative justice work at a medium security prison and a youth correctional institute in Oregon. I have a master's degree in conflict resolution. And for me, this kind of my role and experience at LCSNW, it's kind of been the melting pot of my life experiences. I've also lived in Indonesia for just about 4.5 years. So I have a mishmash of experience that really LCSNW, the heart of the work, encompasses my own personal history. So that's what has brought me to this work. I feel very blessed and privileged to do the work that I do and to walk alongside both the clients and the colleagues that we serve here at the agency. So I would like to also now introduce Joe Asbridge. He is going to be our first presenter. So Joe is a Vancouver native. He's lived here since he was 4 years old. He started working at Lutheran Community Services in 2007 as an AmeriCorps Vista. And a few months after graduating from college with a degree in music. And as a side note, I also have a bachelor's degree in music. So as Joe says, our office has the power of music on our side. And I sure wish we had more of that up front and center. So anyway, after 2 years of AmeriCorps, Joe started working as a grant writer and a special projects coordinator, and eventually began leading some of the programs that have developed over the last several years. So Joe's another one. He's had many hats. In 2020, Joe began formally providing oversight for some of our ongoing refugee services, including English as a second language, naturalization, long-term supports, and elder socialization services. He's also developed and supervises our program called COVID Care Connect and Pathway Community Health Worker programs. And so I will turn it over to Joe to share about these programs. Thanks, Joe.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Mindy. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about some of our ongoing refugee supports, and then also our new community health worker programs, which we started in 2020 and 2021. So recent additions to our services, and we're excited to add these new programs. So just to give an overview of our ongoing refugee support at LCSNW Vancouver. So you all know refugees receive 90 days of initial assistance after they come to Vancouver. And after that 90-day period, they often need additional support. And that's where our ongoing refugee services come into play. So the 4 programs we have are English tutoring, citizenship assistance, long-term case management assistance, and elder socialization. And all those programs are funded through the Washington State Office of Refugee and Immigrant Assistance, which is part of the Department of Social and Health Services. So next slide. So our English tutoring program is an interesting one. As opposed to a traditional classroom model, we have volunteer tutors that are supervised by a professional English teacher. And it's just for students who have barriers to accessing services in a more traditional classroom setting at Clark College. For example, stay-at-home moms, working people whose schedules just don't line up, the class times, elderly people, disabled people. And we offer one-on-one or a couples tutoring. Sometimes we work with couples together. And we used to offer everything in-home. We were just, or in the community. Sometimes we offered even tutoring at the LCS office. But after 2020, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we started offering services online, and that ended up becoming like our main thing. So online continues to be, even after, now in-home is an option, but online services are still very popular with clients and tutors. So, and we have tutors from other states too, some from Oregon. I think there's some from the Seattle area. It's pretty cool. Yeah, and just to offer a little bit of case study on what that's like, we had a Iraqi woman who was, not able to get to ESL classes easily. She was kind of homebound, and she lived with 3 sisters, I believe, and couldn't really, the tutor couldn't really, focus or really work that well at their house. So she ended up working with this client at our office. And so they worked in basically the same place where I had an office. So I kind of like overheard their tutoring work, and it was pretty amazing. Like the patience that the tutor had, the hardworking attitude that the client had. The Siraki woman, she actually spoke English better than she was able to read and write, and so she was able to speak pretty well. And this volunteer tutor was teaching her how to read in English, and it was very inspiring to hear their sessions and the tenacity with which this woman learned English. Next slide. Our citizenship assistance program offers assistance at kind of two key junctures as refugees and some other immigrants are working to become citizens. So we have an accredited immigration counselor who helps applicants become citizens, filling out what's called the N400, which is the application that everybody uses to become a citizen. And we offer 2 citizenship classes per week, which helps students to learn the English and civics and history they need to pass the citizenship exam and become citizens. There's 100 possible questions. I think maybe there was some added recently, but they have kind of they reach into the grab bag and ask some random questions from that list about U.S. history and civics. So we have classes every week, and we offer 1 online and 1 in person. And we offer free assistance for around 150 new citizens per year. And we also offer free assistance for anywhere from 150 to 300 refugees to get their green cards every year too, which is an important step, as they're on their way to becoming citizens. Next slide. Yeah, and you can imagine if you were to suddenly move to another country like Italy, it would be handy to have somebody to kind of show you the ropes, help you figure out if you needed, whatever the Italian version of benefits, healthcare benefits, or cash assistance. Having somebody to kind of guide you through that process would be helpful. And so that's what our long-term case management program does. Well, a lot of the services, people get signed up for those in the initial 90 days. Some clients need more comprehensive care, more comprehensive case management and assistance on an ongoing basis. And we do, we help people with rental assistance if they're having trouble paying their bills. We have some money from the Office of Refugee and Immigrant Assistance to help people with ongoing, issues with paying their bills, which lately has happened quite a bit with COVID-19. So we're definitely busy with this program. People are needing a lot of assistance. Next slide. Yeah, and again, imagine moving to Italy, but you're 70 and your kids are working and they leave you at home all day and you don't know any Italian. It would be pretty tough to find friends, to socialize. And even though a lot of the Ukrainian and Russian immigrants we help have religious communities that they're a part of, they don't necessarily have anything going on during the week. So we offer weekly elders groups, and we're starting to offer field trips, which has been really interesting. We sent a group of elders along with our program coordinator to package and mail aid for Ukrainian people who are suffering as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war. That sounds like it was a great experience. So, next slide. And then I want to talk quickly about our 2 community health work programs, which are new programs to both LCS and to Clark County in general. We started in March 2021 with the COVID Care Connect program, and we have been instrumental to the response, the kind of crisis disaster response. We served 474 people so far, and we're still getting, a few people who need assistance every week. And isolating after COVID-19 exposure, as you can imagine, if you haven't gone through it, is expensive and it's difficult. So through the Department of Health, we're able to offer free food and rental assistance, food boxes for 2 weeks worth of groceries, and $1,500 of rental assistance for people who are having a hard time paying their bills, or maybe they didn't go shopping before they had their positive test result, and so they don't have a lot of food in their house. We are trying to help stop the spread. And then our Pathways program is kind of the ongoing community health work program that we started in 2021 towards the end. And it's services for individuals with complex medical issues or barriers to access to social service or medical care. And we can help with all sorts of basic necessities. It's very similar to our long-term refugee case management program, but there's no eligibility requirement. So anybody, regardless of immigration status or not, can get access to care through the Pathways program. So to give you a real world example, we had a case from Afghanistan that came to Vancouver through New Jersey, and they had a very, very sick child, and they needed access to primary care for the whole family. They needed access to all the social services for the whole family. They needed access to specialty care for the child, and our care coordinator has been at the center of supporting this family as they are reuniting with their family members in Vancouver and starting a new life, and also managing a very, very difficult situation for their sick child. And since they arrived after they had been in Vancouver for 90 days, they weren't eligible for the refugee program, and they weren't eligible for our long-term case management services because they're not technically refugees, they're Afghan placements. So it's great that we have this service. The other thing that Pathways is doing is working a lot with the Ukrainian parolees that are coming through Mexico. They don't have refugee status, but they need a lot of care. They need a lot of assistance signing up for benefits, as you can imagine, signing up for health insurance, and just kind of figuring out where to go for things. So we're signing them up for this assistance as well. Next slide. I think so. Yeah. So I will pass it to Yasenka.
Yep, I'll introduce Yasenka.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Joe. So as I said in the beginning, Joe has had his experience. He's worked in many of our different programs, and hopefully the overview of all those different programs that he's supervising emphasizes the point on that. And, there is a red thread, as I like to say, through all of these different services, but they all come from different funders and have their own special focus. So I am honored now to introduce Yasenka Sahajic. She has been working with our agency for over 2 decades. She's been a rock and a root in our Vancouver work and our immigration program. So she has been our manager in our immigration advocacy and counseling program in Vancouver since September 1997. Her work is to counsel refugees and immigrants about their rights and responsibilities pertaining to their immigration status. She also helps with immigration forms and applications and goes with clients, represents clients before USCIS. So in addition, she is engaged in advocacy for the preservation of immigrants' rights in the legal system at all levels of government. She is qualified to provide immigration legal counsel and assistance with complex immigration forms at a low cost. And a little bit about what that means. So our immigration advocacy and counseling program, our counselors are what we call accredited. They go through a program to be able to provide these services. I like to say, and Yasenka can clarify if I'm off, but it's, you know, she's not an attorney, but she can provide the same services as an attorney and has that expertise and training. So I will hand it off to Yasenka, and we'll see you after she presents.
Thank you, Mindy, for a kind introduction. I just want to also add to my bio that I am a refugee, a former refugee from Bosnia, and I immigrated to the United States back in 1996. And I think, you know, the work that I do now, it's really reflecting that experience too. So I do connect to our clients on that level too. So that probably what kept me going for over 2 decades in this office. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this webinar. So there is introduction of the immigration counseling program that I will give you an overview, and so you have better understanding what the this program is doing. We use the abbreviation ICAP, which stands for Immigration Counseling and Advocacy Program, and I'll probably refer to that abbreviation in my presentation. So as you already know, the Pacific Northwest is a home to thousands of immigrants who contribute to the fabric of our society. And our ICAP program provides low-cost immigration counseling services to refugees and immigrants in different locations. So in Oregon, we have Portland, Beaverton, McMinnville, and Salem. And in Washington State, we have Vancouver and Seattle, and hopefully very soon we'll be opening Tacoma office for immigration services. Our program started back in 1979 in Portland office when we felt that the need of immigrants has been increased, and we needed to start the services, and we never stopped since then. So besides the immigration counseling, we also are participating in the immigrant rights advocacy, community education, and we are helping our clients in becoming independent and fully integrated members of the American society. Next slide, please. So the list of the services are just a few of them that we do on this slide. So probably the major one that Joe also briefly mentioned, it's citizenship and naturalization services, where we offer clients who have public assistance free services through our state-funded ORIA grant. And Joe mentioned that in the previous presentation. And we also have partnership with One America in Washington State, where we provide citizenship services for all other clients who are not receiving public assistance. We also provide family-based applications and visas, which are pretty much for most of our cases that we see. It's based on the family relationship to a US citizen or a resident. Asylum and deportation cases are handled by immigration attorneys, and currently we are in process of hiring some of the immigration attorneys. Our director of the program is an immigration attorney himself, but currently he's not taking these cases. But very soon we will be having some immigration attorneys who will be accepting these cases. We do see a lot of clients who are seeking DACA assistance, which stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Temporary Protected Status, TPS, it's something that we had seen with some countries that are already in the process, and now we see the influx of Ukrainian clients who will be seeking these services. And we have quite an extensive list of clients already on that, waiting for these services. We help a lot of U visa clients. Those are the clients who have been suffered some type of the crime committed against them. T visa cases, we don't do that many, but those are the cases that we also could assist with. Diversity visa lottery, and many other types of immigration assistance. Maybe a couple of others that I like to add to this one. It's the preparation for the consular interview, where people are sent to be interviewed at the consulate abroad. And those type of the cases, we usually see a lot of family-based cases for. We also provide some services for the mainstream community that includes fingerprinting and translation and passport photos that the mainstream community can come also besides our immigrants and refugees. So talking about just citizenship clients that we collaborate with ORAIA, I want to also mention that in some cases we do have to organize the homebound assistance for clients who are unable to attend the interviews. So those people, those clients, we are able to schedule the interviews to be done at their home, and there's the citizenship ceremony and the interview can be conducted at the client's home if the client is declared a homebound client who needs this type of the services. Just brief overview of the Vancouver services that we are existing since 1994, and we do have bilingual staff. We have 5 of immigration counselors who are accredited by the Department of Justice. We have our immigration attorney, who is now the director of the program. We have 1 immigration assistant and 2 support staff. That includes our front desk. We have also, in collaboration with One America, we participate in organizing a Citizenship Day that's happening once a year at the Clark College. So we just had one on the April 23rd, where we work with volunteer attorneys and paralegals in providing free citizenship services. And our staff is bilingual. We do speak different languages. We have Russian, Ukrainian, English, of course, is the one, and Spanish. And myself, I do speak Bosnian as well. So those are the just brief overviews of the general immigration services in different locations and Vancouver office as well. So I like to share maybe 1 or 2 stories, depending on the time that we have with this webinar today, of our clients. And this is just one or 2 stories out of many stories that we could share with you, but we don't have enough time to do so. So I like to share the client story and I call this client Marcos, just for the purpose of this presentation. So Marcos is a 28-year-old client who originally came from Mexico. He arrived with his parents to the United States back in 1996 when he was only 2 years old. He went to school and he went along with his life like any other of his American friends. He didn't know even that he was unlawful or illegal until the time when he went to the high school. And at that time, there was a DACA announcement, that's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, that his parents asked him to apply for. And then he wondered why. He was then explained by his parents that unfortunately, because he came into the United States illegally, he's not lawfully here, he would need to apply for his DACA status. He got the DACA status approved. He became a supervising electrician at the local company in Vancouver. Marcos married his US citizen wife in 2018, and they started a family petition, immigration process that requires several steps to get him a permanent residency. This process involved a waiver, forgiveness for illegal entry, and the consular process in Mexico. In April 2020, Marcos had final interview in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, where he got approved. He came back to the United States as a permanent resident. This was a long journey from his date of entry to the United States in 1996 until 21. 26 years he waited for this. And I was so happy to be part of his story. The second story is about, and we call this client Marta for this webinar. She arrived to the United States in 1991 with her baby boy, who was 6 months old at the time of arrival. They didn't have visa to come into the United States, but they had no choice. There was a high crime rate in Mexico, and Marta had to find a safe rescue for her and her child. Ever since this entry, she never left the United States, graduated from college, and she has a clean background, never done anything wrong. She was also a primary caregiver for her disabled mother, who was a US citizen. Marta's daughter was a US citizen. She was born in the United States. And when Marta's daughter turned 21, she became eligible to file a petition for her mom, Marta. We started this process with Marta and her daughter. And this process also included a waiver for unlawful presence for entry without inspection. And she also had another waiver to overcome for alien smuggling, because she brought her baby to the United States illegally. That was very unfortunate, because for that waiver, Marta would have to spend time in Mexico until the waiver process is finished. She had to leave and stay in Mexico and wait for the waiver to be approved for more than 18 months. She was separated from her family in the United States. She couldn't come back to the United States during this time. On top of this, COVID-19 happened, and she had to delay the processing even more because she couldn't get appointment scheduled with the consulate in Mexico. This time was extended to 3 years. Marta was separated from her immediate family in the United States, and she was at risk in Mexico during this time. She was so scared, and she called me many times for help. I did the best I can to speed up the process, and finally, Marta was able to get her interview, and she came back in December of 21. This entire process for Marta lasted almost 6 years. She's now a permanent resident, and I'm looking forward to assist Marta with her citizenship in the future. Thank you. Let me know if you have any questions about my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer them when we finish this webinar.
Great, thank you so much, Jasenka. Really powerful to hear the stories. Okay, everyone, I'm going to spend a minute talking about our crime victim advocacy program. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we began this program in 2011. Washington State actually is doing some really interesting work around victim services, and they had set up a task force in the early 2000s to look at how victim services were being managed across the state. And anyone who knows anything about our systems will know that really there are community-based programs for sexual assault and domestic violence, but if you are a victim of any other type of crime, there really aren't community-based supports out there. And you know, we know that only about 1 in 10 crimes are actually reported. So that's a lot of people who are out there, crimes are happening, and there's just no support. So Washington State set out to set up crime victim service centers across the state by region. It's changed a lot over the last decade or so. So we are one of those programs. We were not in the initial launch of these programs, but in the second round. So we started in 2011. And then, as I mentioned, we have expanded. In 2016, we expanded our work into the Portland metro region. And then in the last year, even further into Washington and Clackamas counties. So we provide support, advocacy, and crisis intervention And our purpose really is to overcome barriers and to create fair access for finding solutions after crime has happened. We work in a victim-centered way. Everything we do is driven by the victim's needs and priorities, what they're prioritizing. Next slide, please. So in our, yeah, just a little overview, which again, I think is probably common sense for most people, but victimization does have a deep impact in our society. It can really alter people's worldviews. And sometimes, over the years, we've seen even things that many of us might consider a petty crime can have a deep impact on someone's life. We just don't always understand. An example of this is years ago, I worked with an elderly client who somebody walked by her house and stole her pickup truck. It was an old truck, 70s, I think. And at the time I had a 1966 Volvo. So we bonded over our old vehicles, but this guy walked by, he was going to a party. He didn't want to walk anymore. He stole her truck. And, within a few blocks, he was high. He crashed it into a ditch. And she had some property. She was alone. And this truck, she really relied on it. And of course, because it was an old vehicle, insurance was just going to total it out. But it was still drivable. So, and it ended up just being a really big deal for her. Having her primary vehicle impacted in this way. And then there were the sort of secondary victimizations for her around the insult of how insurance was going to handle that. So I worked with her to help deal with it as best we could. So a little story there for just the range of, I'll get more into the range of crime types we see, but just this victimization and how it impacts people's lives. We also know that trauma impacts every element of our being and can take a long time to, integrate or heal from. And so we work with people across all levels of victimization. Some people come to us, maybe the crime happened recently and they're, dealing with safety issues or something that is more immediate. But I've also worked with people who they might come in for one thing that is more recent, but then, come to find out they had victimization as children, and they feel like they have never really had an opportunity to look at that, address it in a way that was supported by someone on the outside. Next slide, please. So our mission is to work to work in a restorative way to stabilize victims of crime. And again, I come from a restorative justice background, and so that I think saying it in a restorative way aligns with also being victim-centered. Our systems often think they know what's best for people, and we try to let things be determined by the person who is impacted. And so when I say restorative, that's what I mean by that. We definitely hold the values of empowerment, education, and support. We want people who have been victimized to have a voice in the process. We want them to feel like they've been treated with dignity and to be listened to and believed. There are many, many people I've worked with over the years that will say that actually, if their case is in the criminal justice system, they will say that actually that process is worse than what actually happened, the crime. So we know that our criminal justice system has a lot of room to grow and improve. And I think it is. Change is slow. But, as a community-based advocacy program, our mission is not to get our witness ready for a prosecution. It's that, again, we're there to actually see what does this person need after this crime. And the criminal justice process doesn't always align with the human that's been impacted. So we also, we feel quite strongly around how just bearing witness to people's experiences and victimization or pain, that can often be a really empowering experience for people to be seen, and that can help them move forward and integrate and heal around what's happened to them. Next slide, please. So the crime types that we serve, it's a range, and this is, you can see this list in front of you. So it's a broad range of crimes. We specifically don't focus on sexual assault or domestic violence because there are programs like the YWCA that have been in the community for a long time doing that work. We also know that crime doesn't happen in a nice little box, or people aren't, one-dimensional. So we will often have people come in for one thing, but they are also potentially dealing with sexual assault or domestic violence. And so we try to partner with agencies like the YWCA. We want the experts in that area to be providing the services. The crime does not have to be reported to law enforcement, and immigration status does not impact our services. We are confidential in our services, and we have interpreters that we can access. I will also say, since we launched in 2011, our angle has shifted a little bit. So we serve, as you've heard and as you know, so much of our work is around serving refugees and immigrants. And this program came along and it was more broad, and it really does serve anyone and everyone. But in the last several years, I think because of the nature of the other work that we do, we have fine-tuned a little bit to be, we hire people who are bilingual and bicultural. So while we do serve all populations, American-born or wherever else, so I would say about half of our clients are American-born, and about half of our clients are not American-born and are from refugee and immigrant communities. And that's really become a big focus in it's in both programs, but it's become quite a important and significant focus in our Portland program. And over the last 5 years, I would say we've served a lot of people from immigrant and refugee communities who have experienced hate and bias crimes. So that is one of the top crime areas that we serve in our program. So anyway, yeah, next slide, please. So the advocacy, what does it look like? We are not connected to the criminal justice system. So we don't in some ways have any power or authority over what happens in a case that is involved in the criminal justice system. But what we see often is that people don't even know what rights they have. They don't know the resources that are available to them. They don't understand the criminal justice system or the civil justice system. People will often come and say, I want to prosecute that guy. And it's like, well, that's really not up to you, right? It's up to the prosecuting attorney, and you're just their witness. So we do a lot to help people navigate the systems that crime influences, is what I would say. We can help people file crime victim compensation applications. We will go to court with people. We spend a lot of time just offering emotional support. We can do legal advocacy, but not legal advice, which is different. We're not attorneys. So when there's legal issues that really need that legal advice, we often refer to the Northwest Justice Project as a partner, or we have some pro bono relationships with attorneys who often will consult with us. We do a lot of community education and support. I will say one thing, a couple of things that we're not, because we are, a generally daytime work day program. We're not really set up to have 24-hour crisis response. So sometimes we are responding to a crisis, but we're not, like some of you might know about TIP or like emergency responders. We're not necessarily going to the scene of a crime. We're working with people, in the aftermath of a crime. We also are not divorce or family lawyers. And I say that a little bit in jest. Sometimes we have people come to us and, they need help with these things. And it really might feel like a crime what's happening sometimes, but it's not. So, we are, that list of crimes that I showed earlier is a good outline of how people can access the program. Next slide, please. So how do people access services? Anyway, they can call directly. Some of you are involved in faith groups. So sometimes maybe through a pastor or a colleague or a church member. Basically, you call our office. We have an intake process. We assign an advocate to the case. And that's another thing I think just to mention. Our system, different organizations do advocacy in different ways. Some organizations, you just get who you get when you call, and every time you call in, you might get a different person. We tend to assign advocates to our cases, so people are working ongoing with the clients that we're serving. So anyone who has been the victim of a crime in Clark County or in Multnomah County, Clackamas, and Washington counties in Oregon can access our services. Or maybe you take a trip to Vegas and you live in Clark County, something happened. So even if the crime happened somewhere else, but you live in one of these counties, you're able to access the program. So how long do services last? As long as necessary, as long as the person wants them to last. So we've had cases, that they might call in one time and get the question answered. Or now the program's been going since 2011. There are people that came into the program in 2011 that I still talk to regularly. And as this says, no, so many cases don't have any connection to the criminal justice system. As I mentioned at the very beginning, many crimes are not even ever reported. There's a lot of reasons for that. And especially in BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, refugee immigrant communities, there can be a real distrust of law enforcement. And so and sometimes like with the hate crimes, what we've seen is people, if you're a newly or recently arrived immigrant or refugee, you might not even understand that what's happened to you is considered a crime, right? It might just be like, this is how life is. This is just an experience that I have over and over. So there is some education. And so it doesn't matter for us if there is a police report or not. Next slide, please. So because we're community-based, I can't say enough how much our community relationships and partnerships are a critical component of our work. And, since I've been involved over the last decade, it's this funny ebb and flow. You build relationships and then there's staff turnover, both internally and in other organizations. And so there's a constant building, I guess, a constant building of these networks and relationships. So we definitely can't do this without community support. We definitely for some of our contracts, we have pretty large match requirement that we have to meet. We meet that match by having interns, usually social work interns, but we've had criminal justice interns or other types of interns. And then just word of mouth. So if you know people who have experienced something and they could use a little bit extra support, have them call us. We're happy to offer the support. Next slide. So I'll just tell you one quick story about someone I referenced that I have a client who I started working with in 2011. She was an elderly woman, is an elderly woman who was having some family stuff go on. There was, I definitely think, some elder abuse, stuff with medications and power and control around her home. And I still talk to her at least monthly, and recently several times a week as things kind of flare up in her life again. And so, and it's, you know, it's interesting. A lot of us think of justice as maybe going through the criminal justice system, and so often that is just not what happens. And so she initially came to us to file a protection order. That didn't end up happening, but she has remained estranged from her family. And over these 10 years, I would say 90% of our phone calls are still her processing why that happened and why the family hasn't come to try to repair the harm, and her just making sense of this life experience. So anyway, we see a lot of that. Or, you know, I've had folks come to me for one thing, and then 5 years later they call in because something else happened. Or I had a guy once who had a crime, it was attempted murder over 20 years ago, but he still had medical issues related to that crime, and was trying to deal with those medical issues and needed support around that. So we see a lot of different types of crimes, lots of different types of people. I will say probably 3/4 of our clients are women. And I often think about how we can change that, because we also know that men, especially serious violence like assault, men are victimized also. And I wonder what's happening to folks who aren't calling in, specifically men, after serious crime like assault. So anyway, there's more that we can do. There's certainly a lot of need for the service. And I'm going to stop talking. As you see, I can go and go about this work because I think it's really important, but I want to make sure that we have a few minutes to go through some of the questions. And if you have a question, feel free to turn your video on, and we'll get through as many of these as we can. Let's see, I'm wondering, so there is a question here. Are the 150 new citizens from one country or all? I think, Joe, that might be from yours.
Yeah, it's so the citizenship, the naturalization program that I mentioned is available for any immigrants who are receiving public assistance. So wide variety of countries, but they have to be receiving public assistance.
Great. I see. Can volunteers help with long-term case management?
They have been, but not so much formally. Usually the volunteers are through our refugee reception and placement or our Afghan placement and assistance programs. And, you know, in some cases we've worked with those programs to leverage some volunteers to help out with some ongoing case management needs. So those are the best ways to get into the, into helping people.
Okay. And then do you have enough ESL tutors?
We can always use more potential ESL tutors, I would say. We might, it's kind of like this thing, sometimes we have too many clients and not enough tutors, and sometimes we have too many tutors and not enough clients. But you can always call and inquire, and we'll let you know where we're at. You might get on a waiting list, or you might get placed right away, depending on the luck of the draw when you apply.
Okay, and I think there's a question for you, Sanka. maybe I missed it. So I see Matt has, are there enough immigration advocates and attorneys to handle the hundreds of Afghans and now Ukrainians who are allowed to stay in the US for 2 years as parolees? How long is the wait list? So Yasenka can add more to this, but for sure there are not enough immigration advocates and attorneys. This is something that I think there will be new programs that are rolled out. We're all kind of waiting to learn what that will look like and what funding might exist. I'll also add, we've had a hard time hiring attorneys. The whole landscape of the economy and the job market is definitely impacting our work across the board, but for sure in the in the immigration realm. But Yasenka, is there more you'd add?
No, I think you covered it very well. So I just want to add, we have, currently about more than 100 people on the list waiting for the TPS assistance, and there will be more clients coming. So the need is there, but we definitely need more help, if not attorneys, then paralegals. And we hope certainly that we will get some funding to be able to hire them and to get some help. Yeah.
I see an anonymous, what are the biggest needs you have right now that the community can support? I definitely think, volunteers for things like ESL, family mentors for our refugee work. We always need additional finances. We are a nonprofit and a lot of our contracts don't actually cover the costs of our staffing. And we are a nonprofit, so our wages are lower than in other realms, and we're working really hard to pay people a living wage. So I think, we could get much more into that, but that's an overview of that question. I see that there's a question about how the work is funded, and I don't know if that was specifically about the crime victim work or all of it. So all of our programs, I would say, except our immigration counseling and advocacy. So our ICAP, Immigration Counseling and Advocacy Program, is a fee-for-service program. All of our other programs are, we have different contracts with different entities from county to state to federal. So there's a broad range of funding sources. For our crime victim work in Washington, it's through the Department of Commerce, the Office for Crime Victim Advocacy. We have different funding sources for our crime victim work in Portland, all the COVID care, and pathways. We partner with Swatch. We partner a lot with ORIA, the Office for Refugee and Immigrant Assistance. That's a state program. So it's a broad range of funds. Is that all? Am I seeing any other questions? I zipped through that because I talked so long about the crime victim program. Are there any other questions that people have that we didn't get to?
I just want to add, Mindy, that about the immigration counseling program and the fee schedule that we have in place. It's a nominal fee schedule that we made that affordable to our clients, since we are aware that our clients mostly are low-income clients who are unable to afford a private practice attorney. So we definitely made the fee schedule affordable to them. And in some cases, we also do pro bono cases where we see the clients is unable to pay our services. And another thing that I want to add to that is that we also help them get the fee waiver. So if they do file for certain immigration benefits, they can get the fee waived based on their income, or if they receive public assistance as well. So, and the fee can vary from $85 to $2,000 that can be saved for an applicant. So you can imagine if we have large families, that would save them up to $10,000.
Yeah, thank you, Yasenka. All right, any other last minute questions before we wrap up? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. So thank you everybody for being with us today, for your thoughtful questions and for your attention and interest in our work. Please reach out. I would love to connect with anyone and everyone. If there are questions that we didn't answer, or if you have programs or connections that you think could benefit the work that we're doing, or that we could help benefit the work that you're doing. We do have one final Lunch and Learn webinar in the series that will happen next week. It is on understanding the Ukrainian refugee crisis. So please join us for that if you're interested in learning more about that. And thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day.